Bonjour and welcome to a very chilly Paris from 130 metres up. Now, remarkably for such a magnificent, iconic city, it's featured in relatively few big video games. The same can't be said, of course, for the never knowingly underexploited Second World War. Well, by stunning coincidence, the Saboteur is set in both. And we've come to the French capital to find out why, this Christmas, we should be signing up pour la Résistance.
The Führer welcomes all second-class citizens into the Reich. Transit papers are mandatory at all checkpoints.
Little did we know when we hopped aboard the Eurostar to Paris that just a few weeks later, Pandemic, the developer of the Saboteur, would be closed by EA in the latest round of extensive cost-cutting. So, while EA insists the studio's name will live on, Sean Devlin's World War II escapade has become Pandemic's unexpected swan song as a separate entity. So let's take a look at how the team is taking its bow.
I'm just getting started.
It's an open world adventure with a distinctive art style using colour as a gameplay mechanic and starring a feisty Irish racing driver sucked into the French resistance as the Nazis swoop to conquer Paris.
And with the game being set during the Second World War, we're being taken on a Saboteur themed tour of Paris, and I've got my map here. It's like being on a school trip. First stop, La Tour Eiffel.
It's kind of like our shining star in the city, and like so everywhere you go, like when you're climbing through the city, you're exploring the world, or we take a screenshot, or you're whipping around the streets, you know, in one of the race cars, it always serves as like a star to kind of guide you through the city as a navigation purpose. You know, in a game where literally the character can climb anything that looks like it can be climbed, it became like a big fantasy fulfillment that, you know, you can see why they've used this thing in so many different movies like James Bond and was it Rush Hour 3, Jackie Chan flipping through it, and we really wanted to have that fantasy in the game.
From here, it was back on the Saboteur Express to Hotel de Ville, the setting for Charles de Gaulle's rallying cry during the liberation of the city.
So the Hotel de Ville is featured in the game in another kind of big set-piece rescue mission. You actually go inside the game, which is kind of atypical for a sandbox type game, but it's a very story-driven moment where Sean has a lot of different options. He can sneak in by running across some, or like sliding across some wires to get in, or go crashing his way through the front gate. Inside he makes this big daring rescue, a big set-piece sabotage moment, blowing up a boiler to make it a daring escape, setting the building on fire as he fights his way through, and it concludes in this giant rooftop, or fight like behind the rooftop back there.
Next stop, Notre Dame, and at the start of the Second World War, the French were terrified the Nazis would come along and bomb the crap out of the place, so they ended up removing every single window from the building. Then at the end of the war, after Paris was liberated, they put them all back again. But far more interesting than that is James the cameraman actually does an amazing impression of Quasimodo. Isn't that right, James?
In the game, Sean is literally up on top of the church after catching a ride on top of one of the Zeppelins that patrol our city, and he's trying to plan a rescue for one of his close friends down in the courtyard here. So it's really just big and over the top, and then he goes crashing in, and then you blast out of the gates, you know, guns a-blazing, fighting off the Nazis on your tail. The whole city is built for wanting to climb. You can see why it inspired parkour and, like, you know, the kind of free running is the roofs, and it just looks like if I could climb, it would be amazing. It would be great. So we're at the Cemetery Père Lachaise, and it's literally my favorite place that we came on our research trip. I spent probably over 3 hours just wandering around, feeling like a 5-year-old, having imaginary firefights with Nazis amongst all these beautiful crypts and graves. Our game is at heart like an Indiana Jones adventure, and we wanted that kind of feeling. And so there's definitely a bit of an homage in this mission where Sean actually goes all the way up towards the crematorium at the top to rescue or recover a crypt, or no, not a crypt, an artifact that the Nazis have unearthed that the SOE want. And so you can kind of already feel there's kind of an Indiana Jones kind of moment in there. But then it actually gets really big, and you come crashing through the gate with the Nazis are chasing you, and then you have to have this big firefight with the resistance. So it's definitely like, it's the spirit of really the game and this kind of, you know, this Parisian culture.
Speaking of which, not all of the game takes place on the tourist trail. The intoxicating nightlife of wartime Paris is key to the game's atmosphere, and so our chance to see the game in the flesh is also an opportunity to experience this cabaret culture up close and personal.
it's a part of the story. It's not something we've thrown in there because we like it or it's cool or oh my God, we can have women. No, it's really what happened, and we want to be accurate to the time period, and also use it to push the fantasy of the world.
Bonjour, Sean. Bonjour, chérie.
Top of the morning, ladies.
You know, the history was something that really inspired. I mean, everything. It actually came inspired by real history, and that's what was an interesting way to start with all this. But then taking our own twist and making it bigger and larger than life, because we wanted that big. We wanted big moments, and we wanted zeppelins, and we wanted like running through them while they're on fire, and like really just big over the top things. And we didn't want to have just your typical Nazis running around that you shoot with the typical weapons that you play in every single World War II game. It was about really breaking that mold.
This was never meant to be a send-off, but with Pandemic existing now in name only, can Sean Devlin live on in the virtual world?
Saboteur is, at its heart, it's an open world action sandbox game, but it is very different than what you're used to playing, and it's a big game. In this modern economy, it's actually a good bang for the buck, literally, because it's a big game with a lot of gameplay and content.
How would you like to play World War II differently? If you want to find out, play Saboteur.
The Saboteur is out on PC, PS3 and Xbox 360 now.